So the Mongols, they were obviously from present-day Mongolia. I mean, it's kind of the same thing as what you would, I mean, it's what you would guess. They're from present-day Mongolia, which is right outside of, kind of north of China, in between China and Russia. It's like a Mongolian sandwich. So if you remember your geography from last year, you'll know that what you saw earlier is pretty accurate. So they're a big old desert, and it's cold, and it's not something that you really probably want to live in a lot. So either way it goes, it's just how things were. It's how they had to live. So they were organized loosely into clans, and what that kind of means is that they didn't really they married off in between individual people, like individual clans and so on and so forth. And they just traveled around following places to eat for their sheep and their goats and stuff like that. They basically just pushed their food from one place to another. They're steppe nomads. They're people who they follow food, but they're basically following their food in a vegetation cycle. Essentially, what's happening is they are moving their sheep from one place to another, and so on and so forth, and so that their sheep have more food to eat in the next place that they go to. That's kind of how that plays out. So Temujin is Genghis Khan. He gradually unified the Mongols. So what he did was he would like get his group of people, and they would be buddies with another group of people, and then so on and so forth, until he was able to unite all of these different people into one constant Mongolia. In 1206, he was elected by all of these other little tribes of people that were following their food. He was elected as what's called Genghis Khan, or strong ruler, in a massive meeting in the Gobi Desert. Okay, so the Gobi Desert looks like what you just saw a second ago, except for it's actually a little bit less green. Okay, he devoted himself to conquest. Now, why this is important is because whenever he devoted himself to conquest, that's going to be the defining point for how Mongolia interacts for the next probably 150 to 200 years. Everything is about the expansion of the empire and the growth of the empire inside. So much like we saw with the Romans, that whenever they stopped expanding, there was no point in being Roman anymore. So like whenever they kind of stopped, everything was built on expansion and growth. The same thing happens with the Mongols. They expand until they get to a point where there's no use expanding anymore. Then there's some really bad leaders. It sounds a lot like Rome to me. So there's some really bad leaders that comes along. There's outside invasions from people, or even for that matter, inside invasions from people like the conquered people who were the Song dynasty at one point. Those conquered people end up becoming the Ming dynasty, and they kind of just start pecking away at what is the Mongol or the Yuan dynasty. And so they start pecking away at that, and eventually they push them out of China and then back into Mongolia, and then it just starts to cave in on themselves from that point. So Genghis Khan is pretty important. I mean, he's responsible for a big chunk of the population. I mean, like today's population, like there's a astronomical amount of a percentage that is actually connected to Genghis Khan genetically. Lots of reasons for this. Most of the reason is that they had these harems of wives and stuff, and not only Genghis Khan did, there were multiples of his sons that had large harems and stuff. So if he's their son, he's going to be connected to Genghis Khan, and so on and so forth. So genetically speaking, there is a very large amount of people in the modern day world that are genetically connected to Genghis Khan.